All right, everybody, welcome into the UFC 309 Around the Octagon pod. We have Luke and Ryan here tonight. Johnny Bones Jones is back at MSG. I'm excited to get into this card. How are we feeling tonight, fellas?
Feeling good.
Yep, feeling good. Hype for this card. MSG always puts on a show.
Yep, couldn't agree more. All right, we'll start off with some news. We'll circle back to UFC 308 because I know we haven't really had the chance to talk about that. To start up, Khamzat Chimaev dominates Robert Whitaker. What is the next step for Khamzat? Does he have that title shot right now? Does he jump Strickland in line, or how does that middleweight division play out? What do you think, guys?
I guess it all depends on the route the UFC wants to go. I know they had pretty much promised Strickland a title shot next, so given that, I mean Dana's taken that back plenty of times throughout his tenure as president of the UFC. And I think it just comes down to location and timing. I know Hamzat's pretty limited with where he can fight right now in terms of not being able to fight in the United States and a plethora of other countries. So I think maybe Strickland's the next go-to, and then he just gets the winner of that.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm completely in agreement with you. I think obviously Hamzat put on a show against Robert Whitaker, got him out in the first. I still think that fight, the title fight between Dricus and Sean Strickland, was too close to not give them the rematch. They told Sean he had to go out get a win to get that rematch, and he did it. Dana White does have, like most times, he is a man of his word, so I think they give that fight. Hopefully, not too much layoff between that fight and the next title fight. And if Dricus is the winner, I think he wants Khamzat. So I think that's what we'll get.
Yeah, I'm about in agreement too. But to be honest, I can't be the only one that kind of wants to skip over that Strickland fight. I want to see Khamzat get that title shot. To be honest, I think it's a more exciting fight. I mean, I like Strickland and all, but I don't know if I really need to watch him jab and teep around the octagon again in a title shot. I think Khamzat's the more exciting fight. I think it's more exciting for the division, and that's kind of where my mind's at. But if they give it to Strickland, I won't be upset. He has deserved it.
I think
Yeah, I think.
oh, sorry, we can go.
Yeah, I just think Khamzat's not really in the good graces of the UFC. I think obviously he's a big draw and everything, but I think with the weight cuts that he struggled with and some of the late pullouts, that it's kind of hard not to give it to the guy who also has a huge fan base in Sean Strickland. Um, and like you said, Ryan, before, like with the inability to fight in certain areas of the world, I think it just has to be Strickland, DDP in America, and then you run something back. I think that is that fight booked yet? I saw something on the UFC website.
I don't believe
No,
it's booked yet. I don't believe it's booked, but I think that's a good point
No,
you
it's
just
not.
brought up about Hamzat with that with his weight cuts and the pulling out and whatnot. Because I mean, does the UFC want to really push a guy who's somewhat unreliable into that championship status too soon? I mean, that could be something they consider, but at the end of the day, he's either getting it now or he's getting it next. So I mean, you can't really delay the inevitable too much.
yeah, I was gonna say I think I agree with you, Zach. I think whatever happens in terms of DDP and Strickland, the next time you see Hamzat in the octagon, he's most likely going to be fighting for a belt regardless, even if it takes he takes another like year layoff, 8 to 9 month layoff. I think we'll see him fighting for a title next year, and it will most likely be his next fight.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
couldn't agree more.
Well, on to the main event. Sorry about this, Luke, but Max Holloway got finished by Ilya Topuria. Ilya lived up to his word of being the first guy to knock out TKO Max Holloway. After that happened, I mean, what is next for Max? I know he was saying he's moving up. What kind of matchup would you guys like to see him up in that division? Where
Yeah,
do you think they go with Max?
yeah, I'll take this one first, right? Obviously, Max, that's my guy. He's my favorite fighter in the UFC on the roster. Obviously, first ballot Hall of Famer. Obviously, there's not ballots, but he's walking right into the Hall of Fame. I was happy with his game plan. I thought he was landing the strikes he needed, kind of keeping the distance. But the thing with Ilya, with the power in his hands of that weight class, um, you just need to get one hit. And Max ate a couple of them, and then he just couldn't outlast it. Ilya looked impressive. I mean, I had a feeling that, if Ilya came to fight his game and Max wasn't able to, really get him in something where Ilya got scared in the first couple rounds, it was going to end up that way. So, props to Ilya. He's definitely up there. I wonder what's next for him. I know Diego Lopez is out there talking that smack, so he's not afraid of anyone. And I know Volk kind of wants that rematch too. So we'll see. In terms of Max, he has the BMF belt. I think Dana White made a good call. I know he kind of said he wished he put it on the line after the fight, but I think he made a good call keeping it in lightweight. Obviously, there's some lightweight fights this weekend that are big fights. And you could easily see Michael Chandler loses. You give him the BMF fight against Max back at lightweight, and kind of Max's introduction to staying at lightweight. Because, like you said, between Ilya and Volk right now, Max, he's just so close. He's beating everyone else. There's really nothing else he could do there unless he wins a lightweight belt and then they give something with Ilya down the line. But yeah, I think the move is go up to lightweight, fight the BMF belt, whatever that is. I think he's going to take some time off. Obviously, he's fought in a lot throughout his career. He deserves that time off, and we'll see what's next down the line.
Yeah, Luke, I mean, you pretty much said it all there. Yeah, Max, he was looking good first 2 rounds. I personally had him up 2-0. I know the judges didn't see it that way, but I thought, he was picking his shots well. Was trying to stay outside, avoiding them against the cage, and then eventually Ilya just found him, was able to hurt him, put him up against the cage, and then put him away. In terms of what's next for Max, yeah, obviously he said already he's going to lightweight. I think he also said he wants to come back around June, July, that international fight week. So I'm sure we'll see a stat card with the BMF belt on the line. I know they were teasing a trilogy with Dustin Poirier for his retirement. Would most likely be Dustin's retirement fight, which would be an awesome fight. See both those guys go out and put everything on the line, especially if it's going to be DP's last fight of his career. And then in terms for Ilya, it's a tricky spot. I know they're talking about Volk headlining that Australia card, and I think what they wanted to do there is maybe do Diego Lopez for an interim belt while Ilya takes time off. They're also looking to go to Spain sometime next year, and I think like the smart move would be to hold Ilya off until that card because if he fights Diego Lopez and Diego wins and it's not in Spain, what do you do to headline that card? Ilya is the selling point for that home crowd. So I think we'll see Ilya take a good amount of time off while they put that card together. And in the meantime, probably the winner of Diego Lopez Volk. And then I guess if something happens with that, you could easily also do the winner of Evloev versus Sterling, which I think is going on in December. So a lot of options there.
Yeah, there are a ton of options. As far as Max goes, I could honestly see him fighting either the winner or loser. So, I mean, Michael Chandler or Charles Oliveira, whether either of them win or lose, I could see that fight being made. Regardless if they're coming off a win or a loss, that's a fun fight. I didn't even think about Poirier, but that's a fun fight too. You could even have him come up and fight Dan Hooker. I mean, that'd
That's
be
what I
a
was
fucking
going to say
banger
next.
too.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, there's a ton of options for Max moving up, and all of them will be really fun fights and be really fan friendly. So, I think they really can't go wrong with Max. As far as Ilya goes, I mean, I really don't want to see the Volk rematch that much. I mean, Volk deserves it. So if he wants it, he gets it. But it's not something I'm really that interested in seeing again. I don't see it really turning out any differently. I mean, you're going to sit in there with 5 rounds with Ilya. Volk's not going to finish him. And you're going to give Ilya 25 minutes to find that shot again. He's going to find it again, I think. I mean, I'd love for Volk to prove me wrong there, but I really don't see Volk taking out Ilya. The biggest test I see is Diego Lopez, but I still don't see Diego Lopez beating him either. Like I don't see anybody beating this guy in the foreseeable future until someone that we don't know about comes up and has what it takes to match him. But I see Ilya reigning for a long time in that division.
Yeah, Zach. And like you said, I mean, obviously Volk definitely has earned a rematch and deserves it. I guess I was a little bit shocked to see that the UFC almost fully committed to it by bringing him into the cage after that
Yeah.
fight, like almost locking it in to an extent. But we also know that Volk likes to be extremely active. He's taken a good amount of time off now and he's itching to get back in the cage. Ilya wants to, as he said, he wants to take some time off, go on vacation, spend time with his family and his newborn. So we'll see. I think the Australia card with whoever involved for the interim title is going to most likely be what's next, but you never know.
Yeah, I agree. So, moving on to some wrestling / MMA news. Gable Steveson has announced he is returning to college at 24 to go back and try to claim another national championship. I mean, this guy is one of the best collegiate wrestlers we've ever seen. I was convinced he was moving over to MMA, especially after seeing him and John Jones post each other on Instagram half a dozen times each. But again, the guy is just 24 years old. And I mean, he's going to be in college for another 3 months, go out there, win a national championship. He's just staying active while I'm assuming he's sitting there still training his MMA. So I still do assume that he will move over to MMA after this little stint of a senior year in college. But I thought that was some cool news as well.
Yeah, the wrestling and collegiate wrestling world really isn't something that I'm too like aware of. I don't really follow it too much, but I was a little surprised, I guess, when you told me that news and you told us that news because I thought the last post I saw of Gable Stevenson was a video compilation of him hitting pads.
Yeah.
So I figured he was going to be announcing his route to MMA after that, but I guess
Yeah, there
that
was
we
there
get
was something
college route.
posted on Instagram, and it was like a Gable announcement, and I was like, "Let's go! The news is finally here. He's transitioning over to MMA." And then read the caption and was like, "Oh, I guess he's going back to college." But I mean, he's young, 24. I mean, if you were to transition to MMA at 25, I know Bo Nickel didn't do it until 26, 27.
Mhm.
DC till he was after 30. So it's not like it really impedes on his ability to transition into MMA. But I mean, I do want to see him in an octagon sooner rather than later. But I also am going to the NCAA championships in Philly in March, so I'm kind of pumped that I'll get to watch him there. And it's just a different environment when that Olympic gold medalist walks in and the whole crowd gets behind him. So for that aspect, I guess I'm excited, but we'll see what the future holds for him. And then the last bit of news I have here is Belal versus Shavkat fell through for UFC 310. Do you guys have any ideas on who you would want to come in and fill that spot and headline that event?
I think it just got confirmed today that they're going to be doing Shavkat Usman for the interim title.
Oh, did I
I-
get confirmed? I didn't see that.
I'm not 100% sure, but I saw like breaking news all over Twitter, and that was flying out there. So I mean, I don't know how true that is, but if that's the route they go, like I don't mind because I know Shavkat still wants to fight on that card, and I think at this point the only thing that makes sense is putting up with someone like Usman or maybe JDM. You can get him back on short notice for an interim belt. And Bilal
Yeah.
Muhammad also said his recovery is only going to be like 6 weeks, so
Yeah, that's so
expect to
weird
see him back
because
in the
the
octagon.
UFC website still has that fight on. I know they're always a little bit delayed. But yeah, I think Usman's the way to go. I haven't seen it confirmed yet. But that's the way to go. Usman's kind of been sitting on the sideline for a while after the good showing against Khamzat up a weight class. I think he's been out, no more Leon for him to, kind of shy away from at the weight class. And I think this could be his last, little run before retirement. I don't think he wins that fight, but I think that's the way to go. And then Bilal, just, whenever he's ready, both those guys could turn around and fight again pretty soon. 3 months, I would say. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if they fight the beginning half of 2025.
Yeah, so my thing about it is that I really don't think that an interim title is necessary for Bilal. I mean, he was willing to have a quick turnaround and fight a killer in Shavkat. So I feel like it's a little bit like, really, you're going to throw in the interim, but at the same time, you need to have something headline that pay per view. And in order to sell it, there kind of needs to be a belt on the line. So that
It
comes into
is it
play.
is a double belt card. Pantoja's fighting as
Oh, yeah,
well.
that's true. That's true. So, I mean, yeah, I guess they just don't want to have Pantoja headline a card again. It's not going to sell that many pay per views. I mean, 301 didn't sell crazy pay per views. I don't think with Pantoja. I love Pantoja, but I don't. He's not really pushing the needle as far as those pay per view numbers go. But then back to that interim title thing. Maybe the reason being is I know Bilal has fought during Ramadan in the past, but granted, that was as the guy who was the hunter. Now he's sitting there as the champ, and as the champ, do you want to put yourself in a position of liability fighting during Ramadan? Maybe not. So maybe that's why an interim title could be necessary there. If Bilal is not going to come back until after Ramadan, then I could see it making sense. But all right, on to the card. To start us off, we have Veronica Hardy at minus 150 versus Eduarda Mora at plus 125. Hardy is 9-4-1 in her career and is 4-4 in the UFC, opposed to Mora, who is 10-1 in her career and 1-1 in the UFC. Ryan, you can kick us off here. How do you feel this fight's going?
I think I have Hardy by decision. I know she took an extensive amount of time off after her last loss in the UFC, and now she's riding a 3-fight win streak. I mean, with all that momentum, and with her coaching and really good game plan development, I see Veronica Hardy just going out there and squeaking it to a solid decision. I think Mora is coming off a one fight a loss in her last fight, didn't look too great, and Hardy's just been showing continuous improvement within her last 3 fights. So I think she carries that momentum into this one.
Yep. I know Colin's not on this call, but we stay away from first fights, women's fights on, when we're betting. Generally in the past, we just always seem to pick the wrong one. But I agree, Ryan. I'm on Veronica Hardy. I think the 3-fight winning streak versus the one loss to her opponent, it just you just ride the hot hand a lot of times. That ends up playing well. And also she's got a great corner, Dan Hardy. Formerly fought for the belt in the UFC. He's still heavily involved in MMA. And it's his wife, so they'll be ready for this fight. They'll have the game plan down. And I'm just riding with those two aspects. I would agree by decision.
Yeah, I also think momentum will play a big factor in this, but I don't know. Something about this women's fight starting off a card just kind of screams split decision to me. And I know Mora is a lot more active as far as her takedown offense goes. And Hardy only defends around like 60% of takedowns, which I mean, it just opens up the control time for Mora. And it's going to come down to one of those things where it's like, how is control time going to be scored tonight? Because you never know any given Saturday whether or not control time matters or what the
Yeah,
deal
that's
is.
very
So, like,
true.
just given that and given the fact that I think it's going to be a split, I'll ride with the underdog at plus 125 in Mora. But it's not like I really favor her in the fight, but just laying it down like that, I was like, you know what, I'd side with the plus money here. But all right, moving on to the next fight. This one's an exciting one for me. We have
Yep.
Basil Hafez at plus 215 versus Oban Elliott at minus 265. Hafez is 9-3-1 in his professional career while being 1-1 in the UFC, opposed to Elliott, who is 11-2 in his UFC or in his professional career and is 2-0 in the UFC. Personally, I'm a big fan of both these fighters. Elliott has looked solid. Hafez has shown he can be legit. I mean, going to a split decision with JDM. I'm super excited. Luke, we'll kick it off with you. How do you see this fight going?
Yeah, this was a tough one. Just like you said, I'm fans of both guys. Um, Yeah, I this was one I was toiling with all week. I'm gonna side on Oban Elliott, majorly because the odds are pretty much in his favor. I think he's the more technical and well-rounded fighter to go 15 full minutes. We've seen him get rocked early and outlast his opponents and put him on him at the end of the third round to get, to claim a victory and get that decision. And Hafez has kind of faded. I mean, his last fight was a win after he went split with JDM. He beat, I think, Mickey Gall, who's the next fight in this card. But if you rewatch that fight, he should have got him out of there, and he just didn't. And he ended up gassing out. Obviously, when you got a guy on the ropes, it's easier to empty the gas tank knowing that. But I'm going to ride with Elliott here. I think the technicality of Elliott is just going to ride. He's going to be able to last 15 minutes, and he's going to get a decision victory here. I think Hafez shines in the early first round, and starts to fade halfway through the second, and Elliott just takes that momentum and finishes this by decision.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Luke. Like you said, it's a pretty hard one to predict. I was toiling with the two, just because like when Basil Hafez made his UFC debut, he took Jack Della Maddalena to a split decision. I thought Maddalena won that a clear 29-28, but regardless, it's a very impressive thing to do coming in on short notice with an opponent like JDM being your first guy up there. But he just hasn't looked like that fighter since then. I feel like if you're going to be that prospect, you should be going out and smoking guys like Mickey Gall. And we just didn't see that. Oban Elliott has looked good in his last two fights. He did get chinned by Woodburn in the beginning of his first fight, which was a little scary. He leaves his chin out in the air, but does have a chin, can take solid punches, and he just has that track record of outpointing opponents and taking them to decisions. And I think it'll be the same with Basil Hafez.
Yeah, I do think Oban Elliott is the more skilled of the two fighters, but like that plus 215 line at Hafez is like, I don't know, man. I kind of want to take it. I also am not opposed to, just from a pure betting perspective, I do think Hafez will start off hot, like you said, Luke. I have been like fiddling with the idea of taking Hafez at that plus 215 and then going and trying to snipe that live line after the first round if you can get Oban Elliott at any plus odds and kind of just playing both sides like that. I don't think that's a bad play. But I mean, I will side with Elliott, but I do like Hafez at plus 215. I think that's a bit of a generous line.
I do like that point, Zach. I mean, I could easily see Basil Hafez putting on a pace, and after round two, you could say, okay, he won round one. You could give him round two, and then at that point, it's like, oh, does Oban Elliott need a fin? It might be one of those really sketchy decisions that we might see for this card. I have a feeling it's going to come down to it where it's just like, well, you could make a case that Basil Hafez did win round two, back and forth, and then it'll be like, where the hell is the judging going to go with this one? So yes, maybe sniping Oban Elliott at live like plus odds is the route to go, and just take both sides of the coin here.
Yeah, that's kind of where my mind's at right now. It'll probably change come Saturday, maybe not, but that's kind of what I'm thinking I'm gonna do right now. But all right, on to the third fight of the card. We have Mickey Gall at minus 135 versus Ramiz Brahimaj. I just definitely botched that at plus 115. Mickey Gall is 7-6 in his career while being 6-6 in the UFC, opposed to Ramiz, who is 10-5 in his career while being 2-3 in the UFC. This one's kind of funny because stylistically, these guys are like they kind of mirror each other a little bit. As far as both being submission specialists, they have very similar outputs as far as their takedowns go, their takedown accuracies go, and whatnot. So this should be an interesting one to see who is better at their craft. I'm excited for it. But we'll kick it over to you, Ryan. How are you feeling about this one? Where are you leaning?
I'm not too confident either way. It's like you said, both guys are very similarly matched. So I think it just comes down to who's better on the feet. And even with both of them, I know Brahimaj has that pretty powerful like right hand, but I think Mickey Gall can maybe just outpoint him on the feet and just coast his way to a decision, avoiding takedowns. I don't think either of these guys are going to be in spots where they're looking for submissions. I think the fight stays on the feet and mostly up against the cage. And I'll take Mickey Gall winning this by split.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Ryan. I think I'm just riding with the Jersey kid and Mickey Gall. We kind of talked about it in the last fight with Hafiz. He went the distance with Hafiz and started putting him on the third. He's shown the ability to, be there in the end of the fights, and that always plays measures. And I'm also just taking a little bit more experience. There's always something to be said. The hometown guys fighting, especially at MSG, those guys show out. Um, I remember when we were there a couple years ago for the Pereira Izzy fight. It was like kind of the start of Matt Frivola. He was a huge underdog. I think over plus 300. He ended up knocking out the guy, and the whole crowd was going crazy. So there's definitely an aspect that plays. Um, and like you said, I think he could point this one out and get a victory. And I just think the grappling is pretty much a draw there. The both guys, if you look at their stats, Mickey Gall 1.18 takedowns average per 15 minutes, 1.61 for Ramiz. It's so close, 32% accuracy for Gall and takedowns, 35% for Ramiz. So I think it will end up being a stand up. Who's better standing up? And I favor Mickey Gall, but I think this is an easy stay away fight. Too early in the card to lose out in a parlay. Neither of these guys really pose as parlay pieces to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more as far as, the betting aspect of this, Luke. I really don't want to bet on this fight very much. And if I'm gonna bet on it, I'm gonna bet it straight. Or maybe take Gall by points because Gall does have a higher output than Ramiz. And also Gall has the ability to fight out of both stances where Ramiz doesn't. So I think being able to fight orthodox and southpaw gives you opportunities to open up the striking a little bit, as well as gives you the opportunities to defend takedowns. You know where you're comfortable at. If he's pressing a takedown, you can switch your stances there into whatever stance you have that can help negate the wrestling, and it can also open up your wrestling as well. So I think being able to fight both orthodox and southpaw along with the higher output has me leaning Gall. So maybe I'll sprinkle on Gall straight, but I'm not throwing in any parlays, and I'm not overly confident in anything in that fight. But all right, moving on to the fourth fight of the evening. We have Marcin Tybura at minus 150 versus Joanata Diniz at plus 125. Tybura is 25-9 in his long professional career while being 13-8 in the UFC, opposed to Diniz, who is 8-0 in his career, being 2-0 in the UFC. We'll kick it off with you, Luke. Are you favoring the elder man here in Tybura? Do you think this minus 150 is an accurate line?
Who's minus 150? Denise?
Tybura is minus 150.
Yeah, I'm going with the underdog here. I think Denise was lined up to fight Derek Lewis, which I do think is still a little bit higher competition for him. Like you said, he's undefeated. 2 wins in the UFC. I think he won Contender Series as well. So
Yep.
3 wins at that caliber of an opponent. And honestly, I kind of fade Tabora every time he fights. He beat Tai Tuivasa was the last time I lost money fading him, but I'm just not confident in his ability. I think Denise is better on the ground for sure and better standing up than him. And I think he's got a slight reach advantage, about an inch and a half. I'm just riding with Denise here. I think this is my first underdog pick of the day. I got Denise here. I think he gets it done within the distance too.
I guess this is where we first disagreement of the card. I'm going with Tybura. Given his last fight with his last win with against Tuivasa, and Denise being a former glory kickboxer, so it's not like he has a base in grappling and wrestling. I have a feeling that Tybura, if he sticks to like a well-rounded game plan and just goes for the takedown, he should be able to do the same thing relative to what he did to Tuivasa. Yeah, Tuivasa. Denise did get taken down by Carl Williams in his last fight. Got controlled for 2 minutes. He ultimately won that fight by UD. And I think that if Denise can't knock him out, Tybura will just take him down in between rounds and just kind of either coast his way to a decision, or you could see if Denise really does struggle that much on the ground, you could see Tybura winning by ground and pound KO.
Yeah, to me, like this is a position for Denise to make a name for himself against like the first better known fighter in his career. I mean, Tybor is a well known, respected veteran. So Denise here is his real first like platform to go out there and make a name for himself against, a bigger name. And I do like that spotlight for the Brazilian. I think it also bodes a little bit better for the UFC if he wins and you have something with this guy, opposed to if he loses, it's kind of like, all right, I mean, you're now 8-1 with a loss at Tybora. Like, what are you? Where are you really going to go? You're just going to be one of those guys that just lags around in the division. Given the stakes on the line, I do favor Denise, and I like the plus money here. All right, moving on to the next fight. We have David Onama at minus 1,300 versus Roberto Romero at plus 700. Onama is 12-2 in his career while being 4-2 in the UFC versus Romero, who is 8-3-1 in his career, making his UFC debut. I mean, the odds should speak for themselves. Does anyone have any counter argument here on why Romero could pull out this win?
Not necessarily an argument. I just think you've seen it in the past. Like, there's not too much known about Roberto Romero, and it's sort of like I'm trying to think. There was a guy who fought on the first Saudi Arabia card. He beat Muhammad Naimov. His name was something Lima, where everyone wrote him off. Muhammad Naimov was like a minus 500 favorite. And then this guy just comes out and puts an absolute pace and ends up finding a submission in the third round against like what would be like a crazy heavy favorite. But other than that, I think the odds do speak for themselves. Onama probably should find his way to a KO victory. But I wouldn't be surprised if this dude, Roberto Romero, not much to be said about, sort of like Diego Lopez, if it's just one of those situations where this dude just comes on, puts on the fight of his life, and beats David Onama. I just advise betting on this fight either way. Or I don't advise betting on this fight either way.
Yeah, right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. When there's a guy coming in for his debut, kind of unknown, no picture on the UFC website, I think there's really nothing to lose. Obviously, you're still kind of fighting for the contract, but if you perform or you put on a show, you normally stay on the roster, even without a win. So I'm riding with Onama here. Just like you said, probably not a parlay piece, just too much skepticism to really nail one down. But I think this could be an interesting fight. I don't know anything about Romero, so I'm just going to be a fan for this one.
Yeah, I'm not betting this at all. Just because of the odds, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna pick Onama. I feel like you'd kind of have to be stupid to not pick the minus 1,300. But it's like one of those things where Onama, he's seeing a guy that's 4-2 in his UFC career being a minus 1,300 favorite is just like, come on, like what is that? It's just like they just don't want people betting on it. Essentially, it's like, they're just like, we're just gonna throw this in here. These odds are crazy. Maybe Romero can make this a fun fight, and yeah, I'm just gonna watch as a fan as well. The next fight on the card, we have the return of Jim Miller. I mean, he really wasn't off for too long, but the return of Jim Miller at plus 145 versus Damon Jackson at minus 175. Miller, 37 and 18 in his professional career while being 26 and 17 in the UFC, where Jackson, his opposition, is 23, 7 and 1 in his career, being 7, 5 and 2 in the UFC. Luke, we'll kick it off with you. Can Jim Miller get this done as the underdog here?
Yeah, I'm riding with Jim Miller. I think this is obviously a huge step down from Bobby Green's level of competition. I think Bobby Green really set the stage for everything that Jim Miller kind of lacks at this point of his career. Great stand up, great jab, the ability to defend takedowns at a point. I know Jim Miller didn't really attempt that much, but his face was pretty much beaten at the end of the first round at UFC 300. I just think Damon Jackson really doesn't do anything that like superly scares Jim Miller. And at this point of his career, he's seen everything. He's been in there with the goats, with the Donald Cerrones of the UFC. And he's been around for forever. He was riding that little 2-fight win streak before the Bobby Green fight. I think we all kind of knew how that was going to play out. I think we were all kind of rooting for Jim Miller, being a Jersey guy and everything. Didn't play out the way we all wanted, but yeah, I'm riding with Jim Miller here. I think he will have the ability to defend the takedowns. His takedown defense has been pretty good, and he's no slouch on the ground in the grappling department. If it does end up there, and I think he'll be able to, keep the distance and stay behind his jab and kind of dominate on the feet. Maybe not dominate's the right word, but survive enough on the feet to, turn the judges' heads. I'm riding with Jim Miller, the Jersey guy here from my hometown, still trains up in Sussex County, where I'm from. So I'm with Jim Miller here at MSG.
Yeah, Luke, I completely agree with you. I think this will be a pretty much a stand-up bout, and I could see Jim Miller using that veteranship experience and just kind of keeping at range, staying at bay behind the jab, picking apart Damon Jackson. Maybe he finds a KO finish. Jackson has been known to be chinny in the past, but then again, you look at the guys who's been knocked out by Dan Ige, Ilya Topuria, just absolute power punchers. So, is there a chance? Yeah, Damon Jackson also is moving up in a weight class, so you never know how he's going to look there. Some fighters go up another weight class and they just excel. We could be seeing a turning point, but I just don't see it. And I think it would be a pretty cool moment. Jim Miller gets this one done and just retires. MSG, relatively at home, calls it a career. He's 41 now. This be his, what, 30 something fight in the UFC. Like,
Yeah, 34th.
yeah, call it a career. End on a good note.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite the fairy tale ending for Jim Miller to go out and get a win in front of his home crowd and take off the gloves, retire there. I think that'd be really cool, and that's something I'm rooting for. And yeah, I'll complete the clean sweep here. I also have Jim Miller getting the job done here. All right, on to the next one. We have Chris Weidman at plus 105 versus Eric Anders at minus 125. Weidman is 16-7 in his professional career while being 12-7 in the UFC, opposed to Eric Anders, who is 16-8 in his professional career while being 8-1 in the UFC. This is one that I'm completely up in the air with. I mean, I think the odds kind of express that themselves too. Luke, we'll kick it off with you here again. Are you favoring Weidman here? Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm not favoring Weidman here. I am a Weidman fan. I think he's great on the mic with the UFC guys with DC and Laura and all them, but I think when you bounce back from that injury, it's just kind of hard to really get back into that full fight, mentality. He obviously beat Bruno Silva out, but kind of a controversial win with the eye pokes. And I don't know. I just something tells me that this is it for Chris Weidman. Obviously, I don't know if he's a Jersey guy. I know he's let me
New
see.
York. New
Yeah,
York.
New York guy, so he's fighting at home, but Eric Anders he's no like slouch. Like obviously he's been bounced around in the division, not really ever put on too much of a show, but he's decent with the takedown defense, and that's where this fight's gonna go. It's gonna, I think, potentially be a wrestling match. That's what Weidman does really like, he's a USA wrestler. Um, I just don't see him really having the success and that he maybe anticipates here. So I'm riding with Eric here. I think he gets it done by decision. I think it's a close fight. Um, but yeah, I'm going with the slight favorite, right? He's a slight favorite.
Yes, very slight favorite.
Yeah, I can't rock with Weidman right now. I didn't think he looked good against Bruno Silva. Obviously the eye pokes kind of threw everything off, but I'm going with Eric here.
Yeah, I was really up in the air again. I think like if I were to flip a coin, you know, and it landed on one guy or the other, I'd say, okay, yeah, I could see their path to victory. They could win. But given Weidman being 40 years old, well past his prime, I mean, not Eric Anders is any, he's 37. Uh, It's just weird, right? That horrific leg injury. You come back, you don't look great. You beat Bruno Silva, but it was an eye poke knockout. I don't know how that never got overturned. Oh man, like I said, I have no. I see this fight just go into a decision, and then I think it'll just be a toss up. I really have no pick here, like out regardless. This is like
I
one of
will,
the trickier fights that I've seen.
Zach, before you jump in here, I will say though, I really like this card just basically because all the odds are so close on the prelims. If you get a couple of these right, man, you could put together a nice parlay.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
obviously this is a coin flip. I feel the same way. But hey, if we hit 4 or 5 of these, that's a plus 1,500 parlay we could put together.
Yeah, definitely. I'm kind of on the side where I just won't put my money on Chris Weidman. I just really don't want to. I've kind of already decided that. Granted, I lost money on Bruno Silva in that last fight, but even with that being said, like kind of like what you guys touched on, even though he got the win, I really wasn't excited by the way he looked. I wasn't, taken back like, oh man, Chris Weidman's back or anything. I'm going to go with Eric Anders here at that minus 125, and it's more so just my intuition, just saying stay away from Chris Weidman. I'm also like I love my American wrestlers, but I'm just not a big fan of Chris Weidman in general too. So that could be a slight little bit of bias there, but I'm going to go with Anders.
I will say if Weidman gets this done though, I wouldn't be upset. I think if he gets it done, he does retire. He's obviously got his career post fighting set up and kind of in it now. So I wouldn't be upset if he did win. I think he might retire regardless.
Yeah, I agree. All right, on to the featured prelim. We have Jonathan Martinez at plus 120 versus Marcus McGee at minus 140. Martinez is 19-5 in his career while being 10-4 in the UFC, opposed to McGee, who is 9-1 in his career while being 3-0 in the UFC. I'm going to be honest here. I talked about it in our 301 prediction pod. I am a pretty big fan of Jonathan Martinez. I think he's slick. I think his leg kicks are very slick as well. But I mean, Aldo shoved that right in my face and made me eat my words. But I'm personally not going to shy away here. I am a big fan of Jonathan Martinez. I like J Mart here at plus money against a guy who really hasn't been tested a crazy amount in his career yet against Marcus McGee. So I think this will be a big test for McGee here. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this one.
Yeah, no, Zach, I agree with you. And then obviously getting Jonathan Martinez at plus money is always, there's always some value in that. And he did, he got pieced up a little bit by Jose Aldo, but he did still look good in that fight. And obviously the leg kicks are something that he does very well. But I look at Marcus McGee and he's just been starching pretty much every single person he's come across in the octagon. And I think he just finds and rides that knockout streak that he's had. It's either that or I think it goes to a decision. But Marcus McGee's no slouch on the feet, and if this is going to be a back and forth battle, I see or I give that slight edge to Marcus McGee and either outpointing him or maybe finding his chin and putting him out.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm with you here. I'm on McGee as well. I didn't know too much about him going into this fight. Just watching a couple clips of his previous fights, I was impressed. Jonathan Martinez has definitely cut his teeth with the tougher opponents in the UFC, but I think right now they're kind of two guys trending at different trajectories. I think McGee might have a little more strength, and I think he's a little bit better in the takedown department and in the grappling, and I could see that playing an aspect here. Um, and he also trains out of Phoenix with those guys, Sugar Sean and them out of the MMA lab, which obviously I'm a big Sugar Sean fan, so I definitely have an aspect of that weighing into this decision. But I'm gonna go McGee here.
Yeah, so I'll be on my island here with Martinez, but I mean, I think a lot of it could come down to if Martinez is able to really utilize his leg kicks because you kind of saw that negated when he fought Jose Aldo, and he really just shied away from him pretty early, even though he was finding some success. Which I know Aldo is one of the best leg checkers that there is out there, or leg kick checkers, I should say. But I was kind of surprised to see Martinez shy away from that, even though it's been probably his biggest tool as of late. So I think if Martinez can find some success with those leg kicks early and you see those start taking a toll, that his hands could open up a little bit more. So I mean, I want to ride with my guy here at plus 120. All right, on to the main card. We have the fighting nerd Mauricio Ruffy at minus 950 versus James Lontop at plus 550. Ruffy is 10-1 in his career while being only 1-0 in the UFC, but he did have that finish on the Contender Series. While Lontop is 14-1 in his career and is 0-2 in the UFC. Again, this is another one where the odds kind of speak for themselves here, and I feel like this script might already be written. But let's kick it off with you, Ryan. How you feeling here?
Yeah, give me Mauricio Ruffy by KO. I mean, he looked phenomenal in his UFC debut at 301 in Brazil against Jamie Mullarkey. Got him out in the first round, but was like pretty much toying with him. He had that scissor sweep takedown, like you never see that. There's just a guy that like entered the flow state and just had his way with his opponent. And then another thing to note is the fighting nerds. You know, they produce some of the hottest contenders, hottest prospects on the roster now, and they all say that Ruffy's the best out of all of them, which is very high praise considering the people that have come out of that camp. Baralho, Gene Silva, all these dominant guys in their divisions.
Pratis too, right?
Yeah,
Yep,
Prates is
Prates,
there too.
Prates too, and they all say Ruffy's the best out of them. He made his he came short notice in the contender series against Islam Makhachev's training partner, pieced him up on short notice, and the odds, I think, normally I don't like that when a guy's 1-0 in the UFC and he's like a -1,000 favorite, but I think the odds are right on this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Rye. I think Ruffy right now for me at an unranked guys, he's the next up. His fight last May was extremely impressive. Like you said, Jamie Mullarkey's no slouch. I mean, he's definitely not good, but he's been in the UFC for a little bit. He's fought against, mid of the way guys and has beaten some, has lost some. And Ruffy looked like they're in two different worlds. Like you said, the fighting nerds, they had a great showing last week at the fight night where Pradi's getting I think it was the first round knockout, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, you just pieced up Neil
so
Magny.
yeah, and like you said, these guys are ready. The flow state's going to hit again. I think Ruffy's the next up. I don't think this gets out of the first. I think he puts in a show. He times his shots really well. And I rewatched that contender series fight, and he probably lost the first two rounds. Maybe it was 1-1 going to the third, and he just never went away. Got to finish by ground and pound. Was very impressive, and also up a weight class. So yeah, I think Ruffy has the world at his fingertips right now. The ability to do whatever he wants if he keeps on winning. So I'm on Ruffy here.
Yeah, I'm also Ruffy round one. He gets him out of there. I love that gym. They're just so fan friendly, exciting to watch. The personalities are cool. Putting on those fake glasses is pretty funny. You saw John Jones throw him on after that Prates win last week. That was pretty cool. That gym just has so much momentum right now, and I think Ruffy carries on the momentum of the gym and gets him out of there. All right, moving on to the next fight. One that I'm a little surprised made its way onto the main card, to be honest with you. We have Viviane Araujo at plus 220 versus Karina Silva at minus 270. Araujo is 12-6 in her career while being 6-5 in the UFC, opposed to Silva, who is 18-4 in her career while being 4-0 in the UFC. I don't know. Is anyone else wondering why this slipped onto the main card or what's going on there? I mean, that's kind of my first question.
Are either of them ranked? I don't have the rankings up next to me right now.
Luke, you able to see that on Tapology?
No, Tapology has. I think they are. Tapology
Okay.
has Silva at the 10th flyweight in the world, and Araujo at the 11th flyweight in the world. I'll look.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, it's Silva's 11 in the UFC rankings. Araujo is 9.
Okay.
okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Silva is a finisher, so it's not like, you're going to go out there and just see an absolute snooze fest. I mean, she's finished 17 over 18 professional wins while boasting an 18-4 record. I mean, it is pretty impressive, and you don't see that many women with that kind of finishing ability. So I guess from that aspect, maybe they're thinking you can catch some fireworks here. I don't really anticipate it to be a boring fight. But again, it's like one of those things where it's like I feel like if you threw on that Jonathan Martinez versus Marcus McGee into this spot, it'd make that main card much better. But I guess I might be nitpicking a little bit here. Let's hear your guys' opinions on this fight.
Right, you go.
Okay. Yeah, Karine Silva has just been absolutely dominant since she stepped in the UFC. I think it's like 4 wins by submission or 5 wins by submission, 1 win by unanimous decision. I see Karine Silva just going out there, putting on a pace, getting the takedown. She averages, I think, like 3.4 takedowns in fights, something like that. And yeah, that's pretty much how this fight's going to go. I see it first round, end of the first round submission, middle second round submission, but expect a high level grappling with Karine Silva just finding the rear naked choke or guillotine, anything like that.
Yeah, right. I'm right with you. I think she gets it done by submission here. I think just she's the better fighter overall. Better. in both aspects. Honestly, I think the grappling, though, it's too significant to kind of gloss over. She's on a 9-fight winning streak, 5 fights in the UFC winning streak going back to the Contender Series, if you're counting that. So I think this is a clear cut. I think the odds got this right. I think she should be around a 250 favorite, minus 250 favorite. And I think, like you guys said, it's kind of a surprise with the undercard that this is on the main event. But I think they're expecting a show out of Silva. I think this is kind of a, hey, welcome. We have a new contender in the women's divisions. And that is Karine Silva here. So I'm on Silva. I think she gets it done within the distance by submission.
Yeah, I also have Silva getting the job done by submission. I mean, she's just a much better grappler with that finishing ability, and it's 7 years younger. So it is one of those things where you do have, that rising prospect in the division who has plenty of momentum. So, I mean, I'll also take Silva as well, and I'll take her by submission. All right, next up, we have my guy, Bo Nickel, at minus 1150. Huge number versus Paul Craig at plus 650. Nickel is 6-0 in his young professional career while being 3-0 in the UFC against Craig, who is 17-8-1 in his professional career while being 9-8-1 in the UFC. Well, I mean, as you all know, and I just said, I am a massive Bo Nickel fan, but let me tell you, I am nervous here. At the end of the day, I mean, Bo Nickel's a wrestler, right? He shows that he wants to wrestle, and I know he has to have some tricks up his sleeve coming out against Paul Craig, but if you're going to be sitting there on the ground with him for 15 minutes, Paul Craig has the ability to catch and finish anyone, which is why I'm kind of surprised at these odds. I would have thought Nickel might be minus like 500-600. I mean, this is also a huge step up in competition. I mean, Paul Craig's a big step up from Cody Brundage, and it's not like Bo Nickel went out there and got Cody Brundage out of there in 2 minutes. Like, was it ever really competitive? I wouldn't say so, but was it just pure domination? I mean, I guess by just top control, but I wasn't sitting there really that impressed by Nickel, to be honest with you. And even then, are we really going to say that Bo has much better striking than Craig? I mean, he should hold the power advantage, don't get me wrong, but I mean, just lacks a lot of experience opposed to Craig, where I don't agree with these odds. I mean, I want to hear your take on this one, Luke.
Yeah, I think you really hit all the bases there. I think Bo is the clear choice here. He should win this fight. I think the odds are a little bit disparaged. I don't think they should be this wide, just for the aspect we've seen Paul Craig submit guys in the last 30 seconds of fights. Like, we've seen him pull off the fantastic things. And he doesn't get submitted that often. Like you said, I don't think it's going to really be a stand-up fight. I think Bo Nickel definitely possesses the power, but like you talked about, the advantage and the experience and being in there with strikers favors Craig. Craig has more output per minute, obviously small sample size for Bo Nickel. But I think this should scare a lot of Bo Nickel fans. I think this is a huge step up in competition. I think it's the one aspect of fighting, of MMA, that really should scare Bo Nickel fans, with the aspect that, hey, you could have a guy, you could be dominating a guy for 4 minutes out of a round, and he throws something up and catches that guy. We saw with Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva in that championship fight, where Chael dominated for 4 rounds and got caught at the end. We've seen it. I think it was Magomed Ankalaev where Craig caught him, right? Caught him at the end. Like, anything could happen. Honestly, Paul Craig has looked like shit since he went down a division to 170. But at the same time, he still possesses that power. And like we talked about in a lot of other fights on a lot of other podcasts, what does Paul Craig have to lose? No one expects him to win this fight. Bo Nickel's the golden boy. They expect him to go in there and dominate, finish it before 15 minutes. Paul Craig's going to be throwing up submissions left and right to try to catch one. He's going to throw leg locks in. He's going to throw that triangle off his back. I don't think it's crazy if people throw a sub prop bet on Paul Craig, but I still think Bo Nickel gets this done. I don't know if he gets him out of there, though. I think this might be Bo Nickel's first submission fight, and I think it will more so be the skepticism to jump on the ground and do whatever you want with Paul Craig, knowing that he has that aspect of off the back submitting guys. So I think Bo Nickel grinds out a unanimous decision here is going to be my final prediction.
I agree with you. I think Bo Nickel gets it done. The way he gets it done, I think you're going to see something similar to the Val Woodburn fight, where he threatened the takedown and just leaned in with an uppercut. Because like, he surprised me in that fight. Knowing he's like heavy wrestling background, you wonder how his striking was going to look. It looked phenomenal against Val Woodburn. Granted, he was coming in on short notice, I think 6 days, but still, it's impressive nonetheless. And he shows that he has the power to put people out. And Paul Craig throughout his career has been known to be chinny. I think 5 of his losses have come by KO. Some of them pretty weird. You had Germany fought Johnny Walker. He was going in on a single leg, and Johnny Walker was like just doing those little shovel hammer fists, and then he eventually just fell over and was flat out cold. But it's like Bo Nickel fans probably should be worried about this. When you look at Paul Craig's career and some of the wins he has, Ankalaev, the most notable one,
Jamal Hill.
then Jamal Hill, two champions or guys that are going to be fighting for belts. Jamal Hill went on to be a champion, and everyone was saying, "Oh, he just got fraud checked by Paul Craig." You know what I mean? Like Paul Craig has that tendency to just find these rising prospects and just beat them. In terms of like MMA math, you say like, so it's like one of those ones. And I think Bo Nickel knows that. He sees that and he's like, okay, yeah, I could take this guy down, but if he pulls, if I'm in his guard, anything can happen with a guy like Paul Craig. He throws up a triangle choke, switches to an armbar. Do I see that happening? No, but the possibility's there. So I think Bo's going to try to keep this one standing. And with Paul Craig's chin being suspect, I think he puts him out.
Yeah, my initial prediction was exactly how you just laid it, Ryan, where Bo will go and threaten those takedowns and find a big shot while Paul Craig's not expecting it. But the more I kind of think about it a little bit, I don't know if Paul Craig's necessarily nervous about getting taken down. Like, I don't know if he's going to be sitting there like thinking I have to defend these takedowns because he wants to be on the ground, and him being on his back, he has shown is zero problem at all. Like it's not a problem. I mean, he finished Jamal Hill on that. I mean, granted, what he finished, he had that arm bar on while he was on his back when he snapped his arm. He threw up that triangle against Ankalaev from his back. So like, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be worrying about the takedowns, but I do think Bo is smart enough and he's very, very calculated where he won't put himself in bad positions. And I also think like with his wrestling background, he has a very good sense of feel and a very good sense of top control and where he's like when he's in danger and when he's not. Granted, we haven't really seen him put in those positions in MMA, but I do think he does just have an incredible feel, which you have to have if you're going to be a wrestler of that caliber. So I think Bo will be able to stay away from danger, and I can see him finding a shot and putting away Craig. So I'm going to stick with my TKO knockout pick, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to be how I initially thought it was going to happen.
One other thing to note is neither of these guys have ever gone to a decision in their career. Obviously, Bo Nickel's 6-0, and Paul Craig's never.
Are you shitting on my prediction?
No, I'm just saying Paul Craig's never seen this. I didn't know that until just now. I'm looking back at his record, and he's never seen the judge's decision. So I think it's just another thing to note.
Oh wait, all 8 of Craig's losses have come by finish. I didn't realize that.
One. Yeah. He's went to the scorecards one time against Volkanov's Demir. My bad.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. These odds just like don't make sense to me. Like, because I want to throw in my boy, but it's like, how do I bet on you, man? Like, minus 1150 is just outrageous. I can't even parlay them. Like, the odds are too great to even throw in a parlay and get any value out of it.
You have to get a prop here. Even the double chance won't be anywhere close to worth it. I also like talking about it right now, listening to your guys' explanations behind your picks. I do kind of see a takedown by Bo Nickel and just like somehow getting back control and rear naked choking him. I can see that playing out too. But I would agree. Like I think he's gonna be trying to like get top mount and just hammer down elbows. The 12-6 elbow is now legal, and that's kind of if you look at like Bo Nickel's game, obviously the wrestling background and the power he possesses, that's like huge for a guy like him. So I could see that maybe too. But I think this is a good fight. Like I'm talking to some of my friends, talking to my buddies, like, yeah, Bo Nickel, like, oh, he's fighting another guy who he should dominate. Yeah, but this is a step up. I think this is one that everyone, if you haven't been on the Bo Nickel train, you haven't really been watching his fights, this is where you get on. Because from here, it's straight to the top. There's not going to be many more low-level tests for Bo Nickel if he gets Paul Craig out.
Yeah, he'll have Paul Craig, maybe one more fight that's right outside of the rankings, then he'll be into the rankings after an 8-0 career if he can get there. But I like that you brought up that 12-6 elbow, Luke, because it just reminded me I was listening to Bo Nickel a couple nights ago, and he's been talking about it kind of frequently where he's like, I want to be the first guy to finish someone with that 12-6 elbow. So I could see him getting that top control and Craig sitting there in his guard or whatnot. I mean, if Bo's able to posture up and just lay down 3 of those elbows, kind of similar to like how he got finished with that hammer fist, except this time it's an elbow hitting you in the head. I mean, I could see him getting him out of there that way too. But all right, on to the co-main. We have an exciting one. We have Charles do Bronx Oliveira coming in at minus 260 versus Michael Chandler at plus 210. Oliveira has a 34-10 professional record while being 22-10 in the UFC, opposed to Chandler, who is 23-8 in his professional career while being 2-3 in the UFC. I know about everyone and their mom's probably pumped up about this fight. I mean, this one is awesome. I'm super excited for it. We'll kick it off with you, Ryan. You go and do Bronx here?
Yeah, I mean, you almost have to, right? I mean, Chandler's been off. It'll be 2 years pretty much since he stepped back into the octagon. He's 38 years old, and I do think ring rust plays a major factor in that. It, granted, obviously, do Bronx beat him in their first bout, which was a title fight, and given that this is a 5 round fight and the way that Chandler fights, it definitely doesn't favor him because Chandler's the type of guy, he'll come out, he'll use all of his energy in the first 2 rounds, and then by the third round, you just kind of see him wilt away. And if he's going out there to please the fans and try to give that spectacular fight for the first 10 minutes of it, I see Oliveira getting him out in like the later third, fourth, or fifth round. And you just never know what Chandler's going to look like after this long layoff, especially being up there in age at a division where age does not favor you well. The lightweight division is not kind to people above the age of 35 years old. And like I said, it's Michael Chandler's fight IQ that just puts me out of him for this one. I love when the guy fights. He's a very active, he's a very entertaining, explosive fighter. But with that 2 year layoff, hoping for that McGregor bite, which we know we all wanted to see, it's a shame what happened to his career in these last 2 years that we've been robbed of this guy from the octagon. And I just don't see how he gets the win unless he finds Oliveira's chin and puts him out cold within the first 5 to 10 minutes. And Oliveira's track record is get chinned, come back, beat his opponent. And I just see that going the same way.
Yeah, right. I'm right there with you. I think it's crazy if you've been around UFC or been a fan for the last 5 or so years and you're not a Do Bronx fan. The guy is fun. It has the Alex Pereira aspect. It doesn't really speak any English. That mystic about it, kind of like the Mystic Mac, but obviously spoke English. The mystery about him is just appealing to the fight fans, and he's the best. He's the best jiu-jitsu guy other than maybe the Gracies in UFC history. I think he has the most submissions in UFC history, and I think it just comes down to that, like you said. Michael Chandler possesses power, and I want to see Michael Chandler succeed. He's been part of the Conor McGregor, montage the last 2 years, and it sucked for him that he hasn't been able to fight, especially at his age. And everyone seems to like him as a person, other than maybe Dustin Poirier. But I can't see this playing out much different than the first fight. I think Chandler. I was listening to a couple podcasts early this week, around 3:09, and they were saying, oh, how like no one's seen Dan Hooker go out like Chandler put him out, and no one's seen how bad Gaethje got rocked by Chandler until obviously he got knocked out by Max. But if you remember, a lot of people, even Gaethje came out and he said that straight that put him down against Charles was the hardest he's ever been hit in the UFC. Charles Oliveira packs a punch. He packs a punch and then he takes you down. I see that this playing out the same way. I think the 5 round fight definitely favors Oliveira. I don't think it gets into the third. I have Oliveira. I think I'm going to take him knockout. I think he's going to put Chandler's lights out again. Chandler has a susceptibility to being knocked out. When he gets hit, he goes down. So I really want Oliveira to win. I think he does win, and that's where I'm gonna put my money. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. But if Chandler were to pull this out, I would be happy for Michael Chandler. I mean, I think if you're a fan of MMA, you can't feel bad. You cannot not feel bad for the guy. And he's a great guy. He looks chiseled coming in this camp. He's been training forever. There was that little question that, oh, he's pulling out, he's hurt, and then he went on Instagram and was like, I've never pulled out of a fight. I always show up. I always perform for the fans. So you gotta love that as a fighting fan. That's what we want out of all our fighters. Obviously, injuries happen, but I'm riding with Oliveira here. Zach, I know we were texting earlier this week. You were kind of getting pulled into the Chandler propaganda. So let's hear your take.
Yeah, dude, the Chandler propaganda completely pulled me in earlier this week. I was listening to like one of the podcasts he was on. He was like laying out how his next like year to year and a half is gonna go, and he's like, "All right, I beat Charles. I get the Carter fight. I go out there. I'm the best matchup for Islam. And I was like, fuck yeah, Chandler. Like, this is pretty sick. And you had me all pumped up while I was sitting there. And I decided to get on my phone and send all you guys a text. But let me just start off with saying, like, this is the highest stakes fight on the card outside of obviously the title fight. Because, like, either of these guys, this is their last shot to really have a chance to fight for that belt again. Whoever loses will never have an opportunity to fight for the belt again at this stage in their career. And I firmly believe that. So it is extremely high stakes. And I do love Chandler's mindset. But, like, don't get me wrong, Charles is rightfully the favorite in this fight. And I could easily see it going just how that first fight went. But with that first fight, too, you also can see that Chandler clearly does have a path to victory in this fight if he is able to really rock Charles. And I know Charles sits there, he'll pull guard. But when he pulls guard, if you get 2, 3 big hammer fists in there, that can get called. Like, that can get called. Knowing Charles, should it? Probably not. But I could see something like that happening. I do favor Charles, but I do give Chandler a legitimate shot to win this fight. I've been seeing a lot of people kind of brushing past that on social media and whatnot. And I think just brushing past Michael Chandler is a mistake here. Like, while he has been off for a couple years, he also, dude, have you seen the post he's like posted on Instagram? He looks fucking shredded.
Yeah,
He
does.
looks,
He does.
he looks great. Like, I'd assume he's healthy. I mean, hopefully, yeah, hopefully they both had a clean camp and they both come in healthy. But I'm not brushing over Michael Chandler here. If we were to throw Oliveira in our parlay, like, I'm not going to argue whoever throws it in because I'll be like, all right. I mean, Charles in theory should win this fight, but I'm not counting out the dog in Michael Chandler here.
Yeah, one other thing I want to hit on that I feel like is just bad juju is Chandler. I forget what podcast he was on, maybe on Ariel, that like everyone's trying to get that quitter back out of Charles Oliveira. That quitter is 15 fights ago. He hasn't shown that at all. Even the Arman fight, like that, obviously money on Charles. I thought Charles won. Going back and watching that, you could see the decision was the right decision, but he didn't quit that fight until the third. He was throwing up submissions. If that's a 5-round fight, I think Charles easily gets him out of there. So I hate that perspective that, oh, Charles quitter. Gaethje said it before their fight. We saw that turned out, and I don't like that aspect that Chandler's taken here. Like, Charles isn't a quitter than any other person in the UFC. Like, maybe one point in his career he was the younger guy. Then he had his kid and everything changed. And I think when you get that championship level and you know how good you are, you're not quitting. You're gonna have to take him out in a stretcher, you know?
Yeah, it's like this is the one thing I always hated too. I mean, like I feel like champions, quitters aren't champions. I
Yeah.
hate that narrative, and it's every single fight that we've seen Charles ever again, whether it's Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler. They always say, "Well, he quit." Like their excuses, the immediate go-to is, "Well, he's quit in fights before." So I'm just going to bring that back out, and it's how many times are you going to ride that roller coaster and see other guys fail at that before you and like still think that you can do that? I mean, granted, I didn't touch on this the first fight. It's hard for me to pick Chandler too. He's like obviously Chandler rocked him in his first fight, but then towards the end of that round, Oliveira was able to get his back. Like, and then he was able to turn the tides on that, and then he clipped him with one clean shot, and it was lights out for Chandler. I think the power discrepancies there neutralize each other on the ground, and Oliveira's been active, and he's only getting better.
Yeah, I kind of want to circle back to that quitter thing because I think it's a good point you make. It almost seems like his opponents are like trying to find something that they can convince themselves in their mind that they're like, oh, like I'm going to make this guy quit. It's almost like they're like coping in a sense that it's like, I don't know if I legitimately believe in myself. So I'm going to go out there and just put my eggs in a basket and say this guy's going to quit and I'm going to make him quit. And yeah, you're right. I really don't like that point at all. It just seems kind of silly to call Charles Oliveira a quitter at this point in his career. It just sounds ridiculous. But all right, on to the main event. We have the GOAT, Johnny Bones Jones, coming in at minus 725 against the heavyweight GOAT, Stipe Miocic at plus 450. Jones is 27-1, if you want to call it that, in his professional career, while being 21-1 in the UFC. Miocic, on the other hand, is 20-4 in his professional career while being 14-4 in the UFC. Personally, I think John just kind of smokes him here. I don't think Stipe really possesses the power to put away John, especially in like one punch or anything. I think John's too smart to sit there and let Stipe string together 5+ punches in order to get him out of there. And at the end of the day, John's just a much better grappler and holds the fight IQ advantage. So I see John either piecing up Stipe en route to a dominant UD or potentially getting him out of there by like, a string of strikes in rounds 3 through 5 and gets him out of there with a TKO. But let's hear your guys' opinion on this one. We'll kick it off with you, Luke.
Yeah, I'm with you. The only difference I'll have, I think he's going to sub him. I think John Jones, he's the GOAT for a reason. As much as people may not like Dana White and some of the decisions he makes, I think he's spot on with a lot of the things he says about John Jones. And so I want to go in a little monologue after this, but we'll do our predictions first. So I definitely feel that John Jones possesses everything to get this victory done. He's been training with Gordon Ryan. He obviously is a great striker, and I don't think Stipe at this age is going to knock John Jones out. I think this fight will go farther than a lot of people expect, but I do think John Jones gets this done in the third, fourth, or fifth by submission. So before we talk about some other John Jones things, Rye, I want to hear your take.
It's just weird for me, right? Because like normally you see John Jones fight, I'm extremely excited. What's he gonna do? I see Stipe fight, I'm extremely excited. This one, it's just like I'm not too interested in this fight. I think if you were gonna make this fight, it should have happened 5 years ago. You look at Stipe, the heavyweight goat, unquestionably. But the last time he fought was against Francis Ngannou in 2021, and he got knocked out. He's 42 years old now, coming off a 3.5-year layoff. The time for this fight to be made has long passed, and waiting to see John Jones return to fight Stipe as a fan, I really could just care less about it. I see John Jones doing whatever he wants in that octagon, whether it's sub, KO, riding him out on the ground, just having his way with them like he has with so many of his opponents in the past. I think you're just going to see another clear John Jones dominant victory. Can Stipe maybe find the chin? I don't think John Jones has been tested against, heavyweight punchers. That does come into a factor, but this should be a John Jones easy victory.
All right, Luke, I got a question here for you because I know you've sided on the side where John Jones does not need to prove anything. He's the GOAT that's cemented. And
Perfect.
sure, I agree with you there. John Jones doesn't have anything to prove. But this fight with Stipe Miocic, as far as the legacy standpoint goes, is like, okay, yeah, sure, you beat the heavyweight GOAT, but it's also the guy that got flatlined by Francis Ngannou recently. So really what my question here for you is, Luke, has your opinion changed that John Jones has nothing to prove? Or do you think all this jargon with Tom Aspinall and what's going on, do you think he really does have something to prove with Tom Aspinall? Is that something that, he really should go out and pursue? And what's your opinion on that whole situation there?
Yeah, this is exactly what I want to talk about. I think if John Jones finished his career 4 years ago, he would still be the GOAT and no one would be questioning it. I think to be that great and dominate division for so long, you have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to take 2 years off. I'm going to get my, all my ducks in order in the background with all of his legal troubles, get healthy, put on weight. I want to go beat heavyweights. He went out and beat Cyril Gane dominantly, and now he's fighting the GOAT because he wants to say, hey, I've beaten everyone in my division. I'm the GOAT of my division. I also went up and won 2 fights at UFC heavyweight, the baddest man on the planet, and I beat the UFC heavyweight GOAT. That's his plan. Now we throw in Tom Aspinall and injuries, and yeah, Tom Aspinall is great. Tom Aspinall is in his prime of his fighting career. Tom Aspinall is the best heavyweight on the planet right now. No, I'm agreeing with that. The ducking argument this week, I have completely changed my perspective. I think because of what John Jones says, he's right. Tom Aspinall has never been a champion. He's beaten guys who are contenders. He's definitely really good. But why is everyone pushing like, oh, now that John Jones is doing this legacy run, does he have to fight Tom Aspinall? I don't think it does anything for the UFC. Obviously, it only hurts his legacy. Like, if I'm John Jones, I'm not fighting Tom Aspinall. I'm old. I'm up a weight class from what I fight at. And this guy poses a serious threat. And I don't need that. Like, I could go and retire after this fight, and in 5 years, no one's going to be like, oh, he ducked Tom Aspinall. I don't think, personally. Obviously, I feel like a lot of casuals have came in and pumped this this ducking argument. It's definitely weird that he's not fighting the interim champ, but it's destiny with the heavyweights, and Dana White bought into this idea. He's not going to back out of it. I have no problem with how this is going to play out. I think John Jones wins this fight. I think if he lays his gloves down in the octagon, retires in MSG, great GOAT career. If he wants to come back and fight an Alex Pereira, do like this fun fight, I'm also on board for that. I don't care. Do a catchweight at 200 pounds, or not 200 because that's light
I mean, like
light heavyweight, but do
215, 2,
do 220,
220, something.
225. And who wouldn't pay that? Would you rather see that or Tom Aspinall at heavyweight? I would rather see him fight Alex Pereira personally. It's an entertainment aspect at that point. John Jones' legacy is cemented. It only hurts if he loses to Tom Aspinall, in my opinion. That's my take. I hate the ducking shit. He's the GOAT. Like, let him be the GOAT. Like, why? Like, this is like Tom Brady saying like, "Oh, I don't want to play the Chiefs." Like, who cares? He's already the GOAT. Like, it doesn't do anything for Tom Brady to come back and play one more year to play the Chiefs. Like, they're at the different trajectories. If this was 5 years ago and this was happening, I would have a totally different take. But he's old. Tom Aspinall should win that fight. Like, he should win that fight. In my
Yeah,
opinion. Like,
I
Hey,
agree that John is John and his position is cemented and that he doesn't need to fight Tom Aspinall. But where my like a little bit of, I don't want to say anger, but a little like annoyance comes in is just how he's talked about Tom Aspinall as of recent. Like something came out, I think it was today, where he said he
yeah,
was like, to be
he's
honest,
an
like I would
asshole.
have given Tom a shot, but he's an asshole and he's disrespecting me. At no point have I really felt like Tom Aspinall has been disrespectful towards John Jones. I mean, in everything he says, he's like, John Jones is the GOAT. I have the utmost amount of respect for him, but I just want my shot at him. And I kind of think like John Jones, in all honesty, should have just brushed off the whole Tom Aspinall thing, opposed to coming in and saying like, "Oh, now I'm not giving him a shot because he disrespected me." I think that was kind of misplayed by Jones a little bit. But at the same time, maybe he is just trying to, negotiate a little bit for a little bit of a bigger payday if that fight were to happen. I mean, I know DC has brought up that idea of it as well, but I kind of think John Jones, if he is just going to hang it up after this, which I'd have no problem with, I think him coming out and saying like his statement today about Tom Aspinall, I think, kind of ages poorly. And I think just from a pure fan perspective, I think it pisses off a lot of fans, which I mean, John Jones is pretty good at that. So, I mean, hats off to him.
yeah, I'll say this. It's a weird situation, right? Because you have Tom Aspinall, interim heavyweight champion, who's also defended his interim title. Like, obviously, as a fighter, you don't want to be in that position. That would piss me off too if it's like, okay, the champ hasn't vacated his belt. He's been out for a year and a half. I have to defend my interim title. And now this guy's talking about retirement, right after MSG. I want to unify my belt, give me that chance to unify my belt and show my greatness. I understand that argument. But I think that Tom Aspinall fans are going to be happy regardless of the outcome at MSG, especially if John Jones wins, because he's already talked about it this week. He's like, I'm either going to retire or I'm going to vacate the belt and try to fight Alex Pereira, or I think he said Jamal Hill was another name too for a BMF title, which kind of made me sad because I
Yeah, I
would
don't
like to
like that.
see I would like to see Pereira have the opportunity to win 3 belts. Like, just as like, I think that would be insane. Give Pereira that opportunity to make hit like UFC history by fighting John Jones for the heavyweight title. Obviously, it's not the route he's going to go, but if John Jones decides to lay that belt down, I think Tom Aspinall fans can just all settle down here. He's now
Yeah.
he's now the champion. He'll go and defend that belt for as long as whenever. He'll never fight John Jones. That'll be a what if, but also you remember John Jones is 37, 38 years old.
Yeah.
Well,
Like, exactly.
My
so it's
other thing,
like,
I'm
you
sorry for
really
cutting
want to
you
see
off.
that? You're good.
Yeah, sorry for kind of cutting in there a little bit, but my problem with Jones, here's the only other problem I have with Jones's thing. And granted, again, like I said before, I'm completely fine with him playing it out however he wants to play it out. But he says he's like, "Oh, I'm this like 38-year-old man and this 30-year-old young buck. Like I don't need to do that." And it's like, sure, but you also have to look at it where Daniel Cormier, when you fought him, was 37, 38, and you were 29, 30. So like you've been on the other side of the sword before, completely different. Where John Jones'
Yeah.
trajectory, he was no matter what, fighting there and was getting that fight regardless. But it's like you've been on the other side of that sword before, and I would think like it's like, all right, now that you're the old man, you're looking at it like, oh, I'm old, I don't need to fight you, but plenty of other people did it with you, so
Yeah.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know.
absolutely. Like,
And that's what he said about I forget whoever he won this for. Was it
Shogun, Shogun
Shogun?
Rule.
Yeah, he said he was like I agree that the disrespecting is a little played out. I think recently Tom Aspinall is like he's scared of me, and I think John Jones has said the whole time, like he's kind of kept the same attitude. It's just like, hey, this is what I wanted to do. Yeah, I got injured, and yeah, it's taken a while for me and Stipe to get this together. But this was the plan. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna go in. Like he held the belt and was like, I want to fight Stipe to cement our legacies. That's it. And if this injury never happened, it would have never been a conversation. I think the UFC mostly messed this up by naming Tom Aspinall against Sergey as the interim belt. They should have never done that. They should have just made it a fight and never done an interim belt because John Jordan's tore his pec. That's like a year in any sport to be out. Uh, I agree. I kind of don't like the idea of like the BMF Alex Pereira catchweight belt. I think that makes it worse for John Jones. I think he should just retire and go coach or go do whatever he's gonna do. But for Tom Aspinall to like light that fire and be like, oh, he's scared of me. This guy has literally was in Portland during COVID, ripping spray cans out of people's hands, trying to fight people in the street, has gotten in fights in the street, chased a guy out of his house with a shotgun. Like he is not scared of the devil. Like they're like
Dude, he is the devil,
that
man.
aspect is like John. He's a 38-year-old guy who has been through everything that a lot of 38-year-old guy can go through with jail and the PEDs and everything and fighting in the UFC. He got famous so early, addicted to cocaine, like all this stuff. I just think it just like let's all just ease down. Like it only impacts Tom Aspinall's career if he beats John Jones, then he could say he beat the GOAT. But at the end of the day, like we've seen a lot of champions, a lot of goats, Anderson Silva, Izzy now, Connor, like all these guys who are like at the end of their careers that they didn't go out on top. And I think this is the opportunity to do like Khabib, beat Stipe, which he should, and then just ride off into the sunset. I think we're entertaining all these other aspects just because of the situation. I think it just needs to relax. Let John Jones have the ability to like he has control of his destiny. Let him ride it out. Let this era be over with, and then Tom Aspinall could run the heavyweight division for the next 5 years. Like let's just leave it at that. When it's all said and done, there's a great argument Tom Aspinall is going to be the greatest heavyweight of all time. Like that's probably what's going to happen with the ability he's shown in these fights. But I don't know, not fighting a champ and then saying like, oh, this is what the GOAT should do has kind of I was on the bandwagon of oh, he kind of is like ducking him, but after listening to Jones this week, I was like, if I was John Jones, like I would probably be saying the same things, you know?
Yeah, I agree there, and I also do agree that like making that fight with Alex Pereira, I guess it would kind of make him look bad.
Yeah,
Just as far as the whole ducking thing goes, I mean, there's really no denying that. But that could be one of the biggest pay-per-view sellers in UFC history, like right behind Habib and Connor. If that fight
yeah,
were to be made, like that would sell so many damn pay-per-views, like easily top 5 pay-per-view of all time if that fight were to happen. So like as far
yeah,
as the money goes, like maybe that's what he's thinking. Maybe that's what he cares about there. But like if you're talking about legacy, I don't necessarily think beating Alex Pereira, who is a weight class down. I know it'd be at like a catch weight, but I don't necessarily think that beating Alex Pereira really puts you up any higher as far as legacy goes, because that's a fight that you're easily
he should
expected
win.
to dominate, just given
Yeah,
your grappling abilities and Alex's. I mean, I'm not going to say his inability to grapple because that's really just not true, but against a guy who has a lot of inexperienced grappling, like that's just something that's like I don't see that really bringing you up on the totem pole as far as legacy goes. So I don't like that fight as far as the whole my legacy statement goes.
yeah, I agree. I don't think that's his perspective on it either. But I think when it's all said and done, when we look back at John Jones's career, it's not going to be like, oh, he didn't fight Tom Aspinall. I think it will more be, oh shit, we could have Francis John Jones. That's
Oh
where
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
that's something that I'm like, all right now you could still make the argument Francis is the best MMA heavyweight in the world.
Mm.
Dominated his last fight, obviously in PFL, it's a lot different, but still, like that's the one I'm like, damn, I wish we had that one. I don't think in 2 years I'm gonna be like, damn, I can't believe we didn't have John Jones, Tom Aspinall. Like Tom Aspinall is great. I've won a lot of money on him. I'm a huge fan of him, but I just think there's like we're having this recency bias and like all this talk that everyone's hyping up and just the bad situation with the interim belt. Like if let's say it was just the MSG card that Tom Aspinall stepped in, won. He just won that fight, and then he beat Blades for the interim belt. We're still not having this conversation right now. It's just John Jones he won. He's vacating interim. You do an interim belt versus some contender, and it's over with. But if Stipe wins this weekend, I will say I think Stipe might fight Tom Aspinall, which would look really bad for John Jones regardless. But
That would be absolutely
yeah,
wild if
like
Stipe goes out there, somehow finds a win, and then is like, all right, I'm fighting Tom in 6 months. Be
Yeah.
like, dude, what? That'd be insane.
Yeah,
A
it's
lot
weird.
less to risk for Stipe though. Like,
It's like
100%. Yeah, 100%.
it's just right. So, yeah, I mean, Stipe can win. And I feel like this entire argument is just kind of writing Stipe off, and I don't even know what that scenario would look like in terms. I mean, I think John Jones would retire, but it's just like, what the hell do you do at that point if Stipe gets his hand raised come Saturday
Honestly,
night?
I don't think it would look worse for anybody but Dana White. I think it would, I think if John
Oh
Jones
yeah,
loses, Dana White, like the amount of scrutiny that guy will get from like just on social media from all the MMA fans would honestly like. I love Dana, but that'd honestly be hilarious.
yeah, Dana's really doubled down like with defending Jones in the recent months, and I think that's kind of a backtrack from being like, oh fuck, I kind of put us in this position by doing an interim belt. Um, yeah, it's just I feel for Tom Aspinall. I'm a huge fan of his. I just think we all should just move on. Like, let's have this fight this weekend, legacy fight, one of the two best legacies in UFC. Let's collide them. Let's see what happens, and then they both should retire and go their separate ways, and we redo this whole thing where heavyweights fight every 2, 3 months, 4 months, which it should be.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
yeah, and by all means, it's probably like over a 50% chance that walking out of MSG, Tom Aspinall is going to be the champion of the heavyweight division because John Jones has
Yeah,
said, well, if I win, depending on how I win, I'm most likely going to lay the belt down. So he's
yeah,
going to
and
vacate it.
also
Like,
he said he's kind of stuck to the same story the whole time. Like he's really never entertained an Aspinall fight. Obviously, this week it's headlined because he's fighting this weekend. But I think it's like you kind of got to give him respect for like just staying true to his guns. Like he said the whole thing the whole time. He even came out after he beat Cyril and was like, "I'm an old guy. Like, I want to fight the goat." Like that's what he said. Like he's the goat. Just give him his flowers. Let him do what he wants for a like. Obviously, it's been 2 years, but it would have been 6 more months, and then let's just move on. Like I don't know. I feel like there's so much caught up in this, a lot of what ifs right now, which obviously it's fun in the fight game to like say what if fights, what's going to happen, but like I don't know. We saw it with Connor. Like we can't wait for all these fights to happen. We have to wait for them to be booked and then we'll talk about them, you know?
Yeah, I agree. We just have to appreciate John while we have him for, the last few moments.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to sit back again, just, enjoy watching him fight and figure out after, let the mess get settled after. And I'm just focused on this John Stipe fight. And yeah, there you go.
I think you said it best right there. Let's just enjoy the legacy. It's like watching LeBron James play basketball now. Like I'll watch a Lakers game at till 12 at night just to be like, damn, this could be LeBron's, last couple of years. Like let's just do the same thing with John Jones.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we'll wrap it up here, fellas. We'll get some picks together, 100%. We'll
Yep.
have some stuff posted for this weekend, but we'll wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And yeah, I'm really excited for this pay per view.
Yep. Let's hit a parlay this weekend, boys.